I can see the exact moment my father's world is about to shatter, and he has no idea it's coming. I'm sitting in the third row of the stadium seating, surrounded by strangers in business casual and proud parent cameras, watching Dean Morrison approach the podium with that particular smile she gave me 2 hours ago when I checked in backstage. The smile that said, "We're so honored you're here." The microphone squeals briefly as she adjusts it, and the crowd settles into that expectant hush that comes right before someone important is about to speak. 3 rows behind me and 6 seats to the left, my father is still talking. I can hear his voice carrying over the rustling programs and the distant sound of pomp and circumstance still echoing in my chest. He's explaining something to my Uncle Dennis, probably about the restaurant they're going to after this, or my brother's job prospects, or literally anything other than the fact that his daughter, his disappointing daughter, is sitting 50 feet away in a section reserved for platform guests and university dignitaries. 20 minutes ago, when I walked up to the family cluster near the entrance, my father looked right past me to see if anyone more important was coming through. When he finally acknowledged me, it was with a glance at my dress, Armani, though he wouldn't know that, and a tight nod. "You made it," he said, the way you might acknowledge someone who showed up to a party they weren't technically invited to. My mother kissed my cheek and immediately turned back to my brother, adjusting his honor cords for the 15th time. "Doesn't he look handsome? Oh, sweetheart, we're so proud." I am 32 years old, and I swear I felt 12 again. Then came the moment that made me stop second-guessing every choice I'd made in the past 3 months. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, who has never forgiven me for not becoming a lawyer like the rest of them, asked me where I was planning to sit. Before I could answer, my father cut in with that booming courtroom voice he's so proud of. Probably the overflow section. They have folding chairs on the lawn for general admission. Lucky they let dropouts in at all. The family laughed. Not mean laughter, exactly. Just that casual, reflexive kind that comes when someone makes the same tired joke for the 1,000th time and everyone's too used to it to question whether it's actually funny. My brother Dylan, 24, graduating magna cum laude, very much the golden child in his pristine white honor cords, looked uncomfortable. He glanced at me, opened his mouth like he might say something, then looked down at his phone instead. Same as always. I smiled. I've gotten very good at smiling. I told them I'd find a seat somewhere and let them get their family photos. My mother said we'd all take pictures together later. My father was already walking toward the stadium entrance, one hand on Dylan's shoulder, pointing out colleagues and fellow attorneys in the crowd. No one asked what I've been doing. No one asked how I got here, whether I drove in this morning or flew in last night. No one asked if I was staying for dinner, or if I needed a ride, or literally anything that would indicate they saw me as a full person with a life they might be curious about. That's the thing about being the disappointment. After a while, you stop being a person to them. You become a role, a cautionary tale, a punchline. I walked away from my family, crossed the stadium concourse, and checked in at the VIP hospitality desk, where a student volunteer with a clipboard found my name and handed me a credential on a lanyard. She walked me to my seat, 4th row center, with a little printed card that said *reserved, platform guest. I sat between a woman in a scarlet trustee's robe and a man I recognized from the university's board of directors. Nobody in my family saw me walk to this section. They were too busy taking photos. And now Dean Morrison is standing at that podium, smiling out at the crowd of nearly 3,000 people, about to introduce the keynote speaker. I can feel my heartbeat in my throat. My hands are folded in my lap, and I'm very aware of the printed copy of my speech in the leather portfolio at my feet. I've given talks before, plenty of them. TED stages, corporate conferences, a keynote at South by Southwest that got picked up by Fast Company *. But I have never been this nervous. Because in about 90 seconds, my father is going to hear my name come out of the dean's mouth, and his entire narrative about me, the one he's been telling himself and everyone else for 12 years, is going to collapse. I didn't plan this as revenge. I want to be clear about that. When I got the invitation, I didn't cackle over my laptop and think, oh, This will show them. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a dark little thrill when I realized the timing. And I'd be lying if I said I felt bad about not giving them a heads up. The ceremony started 45 minutes ago. The graduates processed into Elgar, a sea of black polyester gowns and handmade cap decorations. I watched Dylan walk in with his cohort, saw him scan the crowd and wave when he spotted our parents. He didn't see me. The valedictorian spoke, a bright-eyed young woman who talked about resilience and reinvention. The dean conferred some honorary degrees. A soprano sang the national anthem. The sun beat down on all of us, and the stadium smelled like sunscreen and hot concrete and someone's overly optimistic floral perfume. I sat very still, watching my family 6 rows back. My mother kept fanning herself with the program. My father sat with his legs crossed, one arm draped across the back of my mother's chair, holding court even while sitting down. Aunt Carol was taking pictures. Dylan was in his seat somewhere in the graduate section, probably texting. They looked happy, proud, whole. They looked like a family that had everything figured out. And then Dean Morrison returned to the podium, and I watched my father lean over to my mother and say something. She laughed and swatted his arm. He was still smiling when the family friend sitting next to them, someone I vaguely recognized from Dylan's high school graduation, leaned forward and said something to me. I couldn't hear it over the crowd, but I saw her mouth move, saw her tilt her head in that polite "so what do you do?" kind of way. I started to answer. I don't even remember what I was going to say. Something vague and polite, probably, because that's what I've learned to do at family events. Keep it light. Don't give my father an opening. But I didn't get the chance. My father turned, followed the woman's gaze, and saw her looking at me. And without missing a beat, he said, loud enough for half the section to hear, "Oh, you mean the dropout? She's still figuring things out." The people around him chuckled. Someone made a sympathetic noise. My mother pressed her lips together in that way she does when she doesn't want to cause a scene, but also doesn't want to disagree with him. Dylan, 3 rows down in the graduate section, didn't even turn around. And I felt it. That old, familiar burn at the back of my throat. The one that tastes like shame and anger and something bitter I've never had a name for. But this time, I didn't look down. I didn't smile tightly and change the subject. I looked forward. Because on the stage, Dean Morrison was speaking. "It's now my great honor," she was saying, "to introduce our commencement speaker." My father was still chuckling, still basking in his own cleverness. He wasn't listening yet. But he would be. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I was just too young to see it clearly. When I was a kid, my father was my hero. He's a partner at one of the oldest law firms in the state, the kind with marble floors and oil portraits of dead white men in the lobby. He did trial work back then, corporate litigation, and he was good asterisk. He'd come home and tell stories about hostile witnesses and million-dollar settlements, and I'd sit on the couch and think he was the smartest man alive. He wanted me to be like him, smart, sharp, credentialed. He had my life mapped out before I hit middle school, debate team, AP classes, undergraduate at a prestigious university, law school, judicial clerkship, partnership track. He had the same plan for Dylan, but Dylan was 6 years younger, so I was the prototype, the test run. I did my part. I was a good student. Not perfect. I was too easily distracted, too interested in too many things, but good enough. I got into a respected university, full-ride academic scholarship, started as a political science major because that's what pre-law kids did. And I hated it. Not the learning. I loved learning. I loved ideas and systems and problems that needed solving. But I didn't love memorizing case law. I didn't love the combative, zero-sum thinking of legal education. I didn't love who I was becoming in that environment, small and anxious and always performing. I started taking computer science classes as electives, then design classes. I taught myself to code at night. I started freelancing, just little projects at first, building websites for local nonprofits, doing graphic design for a friend's startup. And I felt alive in a way I'd never felt in my poli-sci lectures. Halfway through my sophomore year, I had a decision to make. I'd been offered a contract, a real one, with a SaaS company that needed a designer who could also code. It was 3 months of full-time work, and the pay was more than my parents made in half a year combined. But I couldn't do it and stay in school. The timelines didn't work. I was 19. I thought I was making a practical choice. I called my father from my dorm room and told him I was taking a leave of absence. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, absolutely not. I tried to explain. The contract, the opportunity, the fact that I could always go back and finish later. You're throwing your life away. I promised I wasn't. I told him I had a plan. You'll never be anything without that degree. Do you understand that? This is a stupid short-sighted, childish decision, and I will not support it. I did it anyway. I took the contract. I left school. I moved into a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates and furniture from Craigslist and lived off of ramen and cold brew and the kind of adrenaline that only comes from building something you actually believe in. The contract turned into a full-time position. That turned into a network. That network turned into my own client base. By the time I was 23, I had an LLC and a portfolio and a reputation. I tried to share it with my family. I really did. When I landed my first major client, a healthcare startup that paid me more in 6 months than my scholarship would have covered in 4 years, I drove home for Dylan's high school graduation and told everyone at dinner. I was so proud. I thought maybe, finally, my father would see that I hadn't thrown my life away. He nodded. That's nice, sweetie. Then he turned to Dylan. Tell her about your acceptance to the honors program. When I got my first major press feature, a profile in TechCrunch about women founders under 30, I sent my mother the link. She responded, That's wonderful, honey. Your brother got an internship at Dad's firm. When I sold my first company, a small exit, not life-changing money, but enough to prove the model worked, I mentioned it at Thanksgiving. My father said, Let me know when you have a real job. Dylan, to his credit, said congrats into his mashed potatoes, but he didn't ask follow-up questions. After a while, I stopped trying. I built my second company. I wrote a book. I gave a TED Talk that's been viewed 2 million times. I got asked to speak at conferences, to sit on panels, to advise accelerators and funds. I bought a house. I hired a team. I lived a life that I was proud of. And every Christmas, every birthday, every awkward phone call, my father found a way to remind me that I was still the daughter who dropped out. Still figuring things out. Still not quite good enough. Dylan graduated with his bachelor's degree 3 years ago, and my father threw him a party with 100 guests and a champagne toast. When Dylan got into his master's program, my father updated his email signature to include father of Dylan Harrington, MA candidate, prestigious university. He has never once mentioned me in professional settings, not unless someone asks directly, and then it's, oh, she's doing her own thing. I told myself it didn't matter. I built a life where I didn't need his approval. But it mattered. It always mattered. And 3 months ago, when I got the email from Dean Morrison's office, I saw an opportunity to make sure it never had to matter again. The thing about building a life in secret is that it's not actually a secret. It's just that nobody's asking. After I left school, I spent 2 years in a kind of professional wilderness. I was working, constantly, but I didn't have a title anyone recognized. I wasn't a student anymore, but I also wasn't a lawyer or a consultant or anything my father could explain at cocktail parties. I was a freelancer, a contractor, a woman with a laptop and a portfolio and an LLC registered in a state database somewhere. I worked from coffee shops and co-working spaces and the corner of my crowded apartment. I took every contract I could get. I built websites for startups that paid in equity and promises. I designed pitch decks for founders who were just as broke and ambitious as I was. I learned to code better, design cleaner, pitch harder. I learned to negotiate my rates without apologizing. I learned to fire clients who didn't respect my time. It was terrifying. Some months I barely made rent, but it was also the first time in my life I felt like I was building something that was mine asterisk. The healthcare contract, the one I'd left school for, turned into a full-time retainer. That client introduced me to two more. Those clients introduced me to investors. The investors introduced me to founders who needed someone who could do strategy and execution, who could translate technical requirements into elegant user experiences. By the time I was 25, I had more work than I could handle alone. So I hired my first contractor, then another. Within a year, I had a team of 6 and a client list that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. I incorporated properly. I moved into an actual office. I started getting invited to speak on panels about women in tech, about non-traditional paths, about building sustainable service businesses in a venture capital-obsessed industry. And then I had an idea. One of my clients was struggling with a particular workflow problem, something about patient data management that was eating up hours of administrative time and creating compliance risks. I built them a tool to solve it. A simple software layer that sat on top of their existing systems and automated the tedious parts. They loved it. Their competitors asked if they could license it. That's when I realized I'd accidentally built a product. I spun it out into its own company, raised a small seed round, spent 2 years refining it, selling it, scaling it. It wasn't a unicorn startup. It was never going to be. But it was asterisk profitable asterisk. It solved a real problem. And when a larger healthcare tech company approached me about acquiring it, I said yes. The exit was quiet. Mid-6 figures, enough to pay off my debts and buy a house and fund my next thing without needing investors. Not the kind of number that makes TechCrunch's homepage, but the kind that makes you feel like you've built something real. I was 28. I called my mother the day the acquisition closed. "That's wonderful, sweetie," she said. "You sound so happy. Oh, your brother got engaged. Did he tell you?" I should have stopped trying then, but I didn't. I started my second company with 2 co-founders I'd met through the first exit. We built tools for small creative agencies, project management software, designed by people who actually understood the chaos of client work. It grew faster than anything I'd done before. We hit 7 figures in revenue in 18 months. I got invited to speak at South by Southwest. My talk was about building businesses that don't require you to sacrifice your humanity, about sustainable growth and intentional culture. It went semi-viral in the right corners of the internet. Fast Company wrote about it. So did Asterisk Inc. I sent the Asterisk Inc. Asterisk article to my father. He never responded. A year later, I got the TED invitation. The official one, the red dot, the whole thing. I spent 6 weeks writing and rewriting an 18-minute talk about redefining success, about the difference between credentials and competence, about learning to value your own opinion of yourself more than anyone else's. 2 million views in the first year. My mother texted me, "So proud of you, honey," with a heart emoji. My father said nothing. Dylan sent me a message, "Hey, that's cool. Dad said you did a thing." I stopped sending updates. I kept building. I wrote a book, part memoir, part business advice, part manifesto for people who'd been told they were doing it wrong. It sold well enough to hit a few regional bestseller lists. I got asked to keynote conferences. I joined a few boards. I started advising early-stage founders, investing small checks in people who reminded me of my younger self. I dated someone for a while, then didn't. I bought a house with a yard and an office with good light. I adopted a dog. I had friends who knew my whole story and liked me anyway. I had a therapist who helped me understand that my father's approval was never going to come and that I needed to stop auditioning for it. I built a life I was proud of. But I never stopped being the dropout at family events. Last Christmas, I showed up to my parents' house with good wine and gifts I'd actually put thought into. My father opened the door and said, "Well, look who decided to show up. Did you finally get a real job, or are you still playing on your computer?" He thought it was funny. Dylan had just finished his first semester of his master's program. My father spent the entire dinner talking about Dylan's thesis proposal, Dylan's professors, Dylan's networking opportunities. At one point, someone asked me what I'd been up to. Before I could answer, my father said, "Oh, you know, she does. Internet stuff." I went home that night and told myself, for the 1,000th time, that it didn't matter. But on some level I've never been able to fully silence. It still did. The email arrived on a Tuesday in February. I was at my desk, halfway through a strategic planning session with my team, when my phone buzzed with a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Speaking invitation, commencement 2024. I almost deleted it. I get a lot of speaking requests, and most of them come through my website contact form or my speaking agent, not random email addresses. But something made me open it. Dear Ms. Harrington **. I hope this message finds you well. My name is Dr. Patricia Morrison, and I'm the Dean of Students at University. We are currently finalizing our commencement speaker for our May graduation ceremony, and your name has come up repeatedly in our selection committee discussions. Your work in industry, your advocacy for non-traditional educational paths, and your remarkable success story align beautifully with the message we hope to send our graduates as they begin their own journeys. We would be honored if you would consider serving as our keynote speaker for our ceremony on May 18th. I read it twice. May 18th. I opened my calendar, scrolled to May, and there it was, already blocked out in my mother's color code from the family calendar she insists on maintaining, Dylan's graduation. My first thought was that it had to be a coincidence. The university is large, thousands of students, multiple ceremonies across different schools and departments. But when I scrolled down to the details Dean Morrison had included, I saw it. College of Arts and Sciences, 10:00 a.m. ceremony. Dylan's ceremony. I sat there staring at my phone, while my team waited for me to come back from whatever I was distracted by. "Sorry," I said. "I need to take this. Can we pick up in 10?" I stepped out into the hallway and read the email a third time. They wanted me to speak at my brother's graduation. The university, where I'd spent one miserable year before dropping out, wanted me to come back and give the commencement address to the graduates who'd finished what I hadn't, including my brother. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I could see exactly how this would go if I told my family. I'd mention it at dinner, and my father would assume I was joking. When I insisted I wasn't, he'd get that look, the one that's half skepticism, half irritation, and say something like, "Why would they ask *you?" My mother would try to smooth it over, suggest that maybe it was a different ceremony, a smaller event, maybe I'd misunderstood. Dylan would be uncomfortable and quietly resentful that I was making his graduation about me. And if I somehow convinced them it was real, then it would become about optics, about how it might look, about whether people would think it was nepotism or pity, about whether I was trying to steal Dylan's spotlight. My father would find a way to make it smaller, to downgrade it, to suggest that maybe I shouldn't accept, that it might be awkward, that maybe it would be better if I just came as family instead. He would take this moment, this incredible, validating, full-circle moment, and he would shrink it until it fit into his narrative of me. Unless I didn't tell him. I walked back to my office and closed the door. I opened my laptop and typed a response to Dean Morrison. Dr. Morrison *. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm honored and deeply moved. I would love to speak at your ceremony. May 18th works perfectly with my schedule. I do want to give you a heads up. My younger brother is graduating in this ceremony. My family doesn't know I've been invited to speak, and I'd prefer to keep it that way until the day of, if that's all right. Long story, but trust me when I say the surprise will be worth it. Looking forward to working with you on this. I hesitated for only a second before I hit send. Dean Morrison wrote back within an hour. I appreciate the context, and your secret is safe with us. This is going to be a beautiful full-circle moment. Let's schedule a call to discuss details. Over the next 2 months, I worked on that speech the way I've never worked on anything. I wrote draft after draft. I practiced in front of my mirror, my team, my closest friends. I refined every word, every pause, every callback. I didn't mention it in the family group chat. When my mother texted in April to ask if I was coming to Dylan's graduation, I wrote back, wouldn't miss it. She sent back a smiley face and asked if I needed help booking a hotel. I'm all set, I replied. See you there. Nobody asked anything else. Nobody asked where I was staying, or when I was arriving, or if I wanted to come to the family dinner the night before. Nobody was curious about my life, because they'd stopped being curious years ago. And I let them sit in their assumptions, knowing exactly what was coming. The morning of May 18th, I woke up at 6 in my hotel room 3 blocks from campus. I'd driven in the night before and had dinner alone at a quiet restaurant downtown, going over my notes one last time. I barely slept. Not because I was nervous about the speech itself. I've given enough talks that the mechanics don't scare me anymore, but because I kept imagining my father's face. I showered and dried my hair carefully. I'd chosen my outfit weeks ago, a tailored sheath dress in deep navy, structured enough to photograph well from a distance, but elegant enough not to look corporate. Understated jewelry, small gold hoops, a thin bracelet my best friend gave me when I sold my first company. Heels that were comfortable enough to stand in but sharp enough to make a point. I looked at myself in the hotel mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because I looked different, because I looked *certain. I packed my bag carefully, the printed copy of my speech, annotated in the margins with timing notes. My phone, fully charged. The leather portfolio Dean Morrison's office had sent me with the ceremony program and my speaker credentials. I arrived on campus at 8:30. The ceremony didn't start until 10, but Dean Morrison had asked me to come early for a quick run-through and photos. I parked in the lot reserved for platform guests and walked across the quad I'd walked 1,000 times when I was 19 and miserable. It looked different now, smaller maybe, or maybe I was just bigger. The stadium was already filling up. Volunteers in bright yellow shirts directed families to seating sections. Graduates milled around in their regalia, taking photos, adjusting caps, trying not to sweat through their gowns in the climbing heat. I checked in at the hospitality tent. A student volunteer found my name on the list and handed me a credential on a lanyard, guest speaker *. Another volunteer walked me backstage, where Dean Morrison was waiting. Ms. Harrington, she shook my hand warmly. I'm so glad you're here. How are you feeling? Good, I said, ready. She walked me through the program flow. The processional, the welcome, the valedictorian speech, the honorary degrees, then me. After my remarks, they'd begin conferring degrees by department. The whole thing would run about 2 hours. Your brother's in the 3rd cohort, she said, smiling. Arts and Sciences honors graduates. He'll walk about 40 minutes after you speak. Perfect, I said. We did a quick photo with the university photographer, then Dean Morrison squeezed my shoulder. I've read your speech. It's going to mean a lot to these graduates. Thank you for doing this. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. At 9:15, I left the backstage area and walked around to the public entrance. I wanted to see my family before everything started. Wanted to give them one last chance to be curious, to ask questions, to see me. I found them clustered near the main entrance, exactly where I knew they'd be. My father in his navy blazer and khakis, looking every inch the distinguished attorney. My mother in a floral dress, fussing with the bouquet she'd brought for Dylan. Aunt Carol, Uncle Dennis, a handful of cousins I saw once a year at Thanksgiving. And Dylan, in the center of it all, wearing his black gown and the white honor cords that marked him as magna cum laude. He looked happy, excited, young. I felt a sharp pang of something, affection, guilt, maybe both. This was his day. He'd earned it, and I was about to make it complicated. But I'd earned my place on that stage too. I walked over. My mother saw me first. Oh, honey, you made it. She kissed my cheek, her hands full of bouquet. Doesn't Dylan look handsome? He does, I said honestly. I smiled at my brother. Congrats, Dill, big day. He gave me an awkward half hug, careful not to wrinkle his gown. Thanks for coming. My father glanced at me, did a quick visual assessment of my dress, and turned back to Uncle Dennis to finish a story about something. Aunt Carol looked me up and down. That's a nice dress, job interview. Something like that, I said. My mother was taking pictures. My father was holding court. Nobody asked where I was sitting. So I asked them, where's the family section? My mother gestured vaguely toward the south side of the stadium. Sections 114 and 115. We have a whole row. Are you sitting with us? Before I could answer, my father cut in without even looking at me. General admission is on the lawn, isn't it? They have the overflow set up with folding chairs. She'll probably be more comfortable there anyway. Better view, less crowded. Aunt Carol laughed. Do they even check tickets for these things? And then my father said it. The line I'd been hearing in 1,000 variations my entire adult life. The one that was about to be burned into his memory forever. He turned to the family friend who just joined the group, someone's neighbor, I think, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's my daughter, the dropout. She's still figuring things out." Polite chuckles, my mother's tight smile, Dylan's eyes on his phone. I felt that old heat rising in my chest. But I just smiled. "I'll find a seat," I said. "See you after." I walked away before anyone could say anything else. I crossed the concourse, checked in at the VIP desk, and let the volunteer walk me to my actual seat. 4th row, center section with a perfect view of the stage. The card on my chair said reserved, platform guest. I sat down between a woman in trusty robes and a board member I recognized from the university's website. And I waited. From where I sat, I could see my family in their section. My father talking, gesturing, owning the space around him the way he always did. My mother taking photos. Everyone focused on Dylan as they should be. No one looked my way. The graduates began to process in at 9:55. The opening notes of Pomp and Circumstance echoed through the stadium, and 3,000 people rose to their feet. I stood with them, watching Dylan walk in with his cohort, watching him find his seat, watching my parents beam with pride. I was happy for him, I was. But I was also ready. The ceremony has a rhythm to it, a formal choreography that feels both timeless and surreal. Once the graduates are seated and the music fades, the university president approaches the podium, a tall woman in crimson doctoral robes that pool around her feet like spilled wine. She welcomes everyone, thanks the families, acknowledges the faculty. Her voice echoes across the stadium, amplified and slightly distorted by the speaker system. I'm not really listening. I'm watching my family. My mother has her phone out, angled to capture Dylan in his seat, 7 rows back in the graduate section. My father is sitting with one ankle crossed over his knee. That particular posture of masculine ease that takes up just a little more space than necessary. He's scanning the crowd, probably looking for colleagues or former clients, people he can network with even here. Aunt Carol is fanning herself with the program. It's nearly 75 degrees and climbing, and there's no shade in this section. Uncle Dennis has his arm along the back of her chair. A couple of my younger cousins are on their phones, probably Snapchatting the whole thing. They look like any other family here, proud, together, normal. They have no idea what's about to happen. The president introduces the provost, who says a few words about academic excellence and the value of liberal arts education. Then comes the valedictorian, a bright-eyed young woman with perfect posture and note cards she doesn't really need. She talks about resilience, about the pandemic that disrupted half of their college experience, about learning to adapt and find meaning in chaos. She's good, poised. I find myself genuinely listening, hoping she carries this confidence forward into whatever comes next for her. The graduates applaud when she finishes. So do the families. I clap too, and for a moment I forget the ticking clock in my chest and just feel present in this. The ritual of it, the hope, the communal belief that education and effort matter. Then the provost returns to confer honorary degrees on 3 distinguished alumni: a federal judge, a Pulitzer-winning journalist, and a CEO of a clean energy company. Each of them stands when their name is called, walks across the stage, shakes hands, receives their medallion, poses for a photo. The stadium applauds politely, though I suspect 90% of the audience has no idea who these people are. I watch my father during this part. He's paying attention now, sitting up straighter. He loves this kind of thing, the pageantry of achievement, the visible markers of success. I wonder if he's imagining Dylan up there someday, receiving some honor that he can add to his mental resume of parental accomplishments. I wonder if it's ever occurred to him that I've already received honors like this, that I've been on stages bigger than this one, that the reason he doesn't know is because he's never asked. The honorary degree recipients return to their seats. The stadium settles again. Parents shift in their chairs, check their watches, calculate how much longer until their specific graduate walks across the stage. And then Dean Morrison stands and approaches the podium. My heartbeat kicks up. I feel it in my wrists, my throat, behind my eyes. This is it. Dean Morrison adjusts the microphone and smiles out at the crowd. She's in her late 50s, sharp and warm in equal measure, wearing royal blue doctoral robes and silver glasses that catch the light. "Thank you all for being here on this beautiful day," she begins. "We have one more very special guest to introduce before we begin conferring degrees." In my family's section, I see my mother lean over and whisper something to my father. He nods without looking at her, still scanning the crowd. "Each year," Dean Morrison continues, "we invite a speaker who embodies the values we hope to instill in our graduates. Someone whose path demonstrates courage, innovation, and a commitment to making a meaningful impact in the world." My hands are folded in my lap. My printed speech is in the portfolio at my feet. I'm wearing my calm face, the one I've perfected in 1,000 board meetings and investor pitches, but underneath it my entire nervous system is vibrating. "This year's speaker," the dean says, "took an unconventional path, and in doing so, she's become a powerful voice for reimagining what success can look like." I can see my family from here. My father is still only half listening. My mother is adjusting the bouquet on her lap. They're not paying attention yet. But they will be. It happens in overlapping layers, like a song where all the instruments come in at once, and you can't quite separate them. Dean Morrison is speaking. I can hear her voice, amplified and clear, beginning to outline the speaker's accomplishments. But the family friend sitting next to my parents, a woman named Margaret something who I vaguely remember from Dylan's high school graduation, leans forward in her seat. She's looking directly at me. I see her tilt her head, see her mouth start to form words. She's reaching past my aunt to get my attention, and even from 50 feet away I can read her expression. Polite interest, the social lubrication of a long ceremony, the kind of small talk people make to pass the time. "So what are you up to these days?" I can't hear her over the crowd noise and the dean's voice, but I can read her lips, see the question in her posture. I start to answer, or at least, I turn slightly toward her to acknowledge that she's spoken, but I don't get the chance. My father sees Margaret looking at me. He follows her gaze, registers that she's trying to make conversation with his disappointing daughter, and without a single second of hesitation, he cuts in. "Oh, you mean the dropout?" His voice carries. It always does. Trial lawyer voice trained to reach the back of a courtroom to command attention, to establish dominance. Half the section hears him. She's still figuring things out. He says it with this casual, dismissive humor, like it's an old joke everyone's in on. Like it's a fond quirk instead of a decade-long judgment. Like I'm not sitting 50 feet away, 32 years old, wearing a $1,000 dress and sitting in a section reserved for honored guests. People laugh. Not mean laughter, but not kind either. Just that reflexive social noise that happens when someone with authority makes a joke and you don't want to seem like you don't get it. Margaret makes a sympathetic face. Someone else, maybe Uncle Dennis, chuckles and shakes his head like, "Oh, that's too bad." My mother reaches over and touches my father's arm, a tiny gesture that might be reprimand or might be reflex. Her face is tight, apologetic in that way that never quite becomes an actual apology. Dylan is in the graduate section, too far away to have heard clearly, but I see him glance back toward our family. He looks uncomfortable, the way he always does when Dad makes one of these comments. But he doesn't say anything. He never does. And I feel it, that hot, sharp twist in my chest that I've felt 1,000 times before. Shame and rage and something that tastes like grief. But this time, underneath it, there's something else. This time, I know what's coming next. I don't respond. I don't smile tightly or change the subject or make myself smaller. I just sit very still, looking forward, listening. Because on the stage, Dean Morrison is still speaking. She left traditional education to pursue a vision that has since transformed the landscape of healthcare technology and small business operations. The dean is saying, her voice warm and clear, and amplified across 3,000 people. My father is still chuckling, still basking in his own wit. Margaret is nodding sympathetically, probably about to say something kind and pitying to me. Nobody in my family is listening to the dean yet. She's the founder and CEO of 2 successful companies, Dean Morrison continues. She's a best-selling author, a sought-after keynote speaker, and a powerful advocate for non-traditional paths to success. My mother's attention snags on something, maybe the dean's tone, maybe the word best-selling, and she turns slightly toward the stage. Her TED Talk on redefining success has been viewed more than 2 million times. I watch my mother's face change. She's listening now, actually listening, and I can see the gears turning. She's trying to place this person, trying to figure out if it's someone she should know. She's been featured in *TechCrunch*, *Fast Company*, *Inc., and Forbes*. Aunt Carol hears it now too. She elbows Uncle Dennis and gestures toward the stage with her program, like, "Are you hearing this?" My father is still half-turned in his seat, still finishing some aside to the people around him. He's missed everything so far. Her work has impacted thousands of small businesses and healthcare providers across the country, the dean says. And today, she returns to this university, where she once began her own educational journey to share her wisdom with our graduates. My mother hears that part. This university. Her expression shifts from polite interest to confusion. She's sitting up straighter now, program clutched in her hands, trying to piece together why this biography sounds almost familiar. Like something she's heard fragments of, but never the whole story. She starts to scan the platform guests, looking for someone who might match this description. And then her eyes land on me. I'm sitting in the 4th row of the VIP section, very still, looking directly back at her. For a moment, we just stare at each other across the distance. I watch her put it together, watch her eyes go wide, watch her mouth open slightly, then close again. "Please join me," Dean Morrison says, her voice swelling with warmth and pride, "in welcoming our commencement speaker." My mother grabs my father's arm, actually grabs it, tight enough that he stops mid-sentence and looks at her with annoyance. She doesn't say anything, she just points. Points at the stage, where Dean Morrison is smiling. Points at me, sitting very still in my reserved seat. My father follows her gesture. He sees me, sees where I'm sitting. His face is still arranged in that expression of mild irritation at being interrupted, but underneath it I see the first flicker of confusion. "Ms. Alina Harrington." My name echoes across the stadium. 3,000 people begin to applaud. And Dean Morrison looks directly at me and says, with a smile that tells me she knows exactly what she's doing, "Ms. Harrington, would you please stand?" I stand. It's strange, the physical reality of it. My legs work. My hands are steady. The portfolio is at my feet and I leave it there for now because I don't need my notes yet. First, I need to walk. The applause builds as I step into the aisle. It's not thunderous. Most of these people don't know who I am, but it's warm, appreciative, the kind of sound that holds space for someone to step into. I'm very aware of my heels on the concrete steps, very aware of the sun on my shoulders and the eyes tracking me from every direction. But mostly, I'm aware of my family. I have to walk directly past their section to get to the stage. There's no other route. And as I move up the aisle, I can see them in my peripheral vision, frozen in their seats like someone hit pause on a movie. My mother's hand is still on my father's arm. Her mouth is open. She looks like she's trying to work out a math problem that doesn't make sense. Aunt Carol is starring, her fan motionless in her lap. Uncle Dennis is leaning forward, squinting, like he's not sure he's seeing what he's seeing. And my father's face has gone completely blank. Not angry yet, not even embarrassed, just asterisk blank asterisk, like his brain has blue screened and he's waiting for it to reboot. I don't look directly at them. I keep my eyes forward, my chin level, my expression calm and professional. But I see them. I see all of it. The family friend, Margaret, who asked me what I was up to, is looking between me and my father with an expression of dawning, horrified understanding. I reach the end of their row just as my father seems to come back online. He half rises from his seat, mouth opening like he's going to say something, call out to me, maybe try to claim this moment somehow. But I'm already past them. I'm climbing the stairs to the stage. Dean Morrison meets me at the top, her smile genuine and conspiratorial. She shakes my hand and leans in for just a second as the applause continues. "I've been looking forward to this all morning," she murmurs. I smile back, "You and me both." She steps aside and gestures to the podium. The stadium stretches out in front of me, a sea of black gowns and proud families and cell phones held aloft to record the moment. I step up to the microphone, and the applause fades into expectant silence. From the podium, I can see everything. The graduates, hundreds of them, looking up at me with polite attention. The families, some bored, some engaged, some still settling into their seats after standing for the ovation. And my family. Fourth section, sixth row, all of them staring at me like I've just materialized out of thin air. My father is sitting again, but his posture is rigid. His face has progressed from blank to something I can't quite read from here. Shock, maybe, or anger, or the terrible cognitive dissonance of having reality contradict the story he's been telling himself for 12 years. My mother has tears on her face already, though I can't tell what kind. Dylan has turned around in the graduate section. I can see him 7 rows back, his face tilted up toward the stage, his expression absolutely stunned. And Aunt Carol is whispering urgently to Uncle Dennis, her hand covering her mouth. I take a breath. The microphone picks it up, amplifies it across the stadium. "Thank you, Dean Morrison," I say, my voice is steady. "And thank you all for having me here today. It's an honor to stand before you." I pause, let my eyes sweep across the crowd, and then I let myself smile, small, genuine, and just a little bit dangerous. Some of you may not know this, but I actually started my college career at this university 13 years ago. I made it about a year and a half before I left to pursue what everyone told me was a very stupid idea. A ripple of knowing, laughter from the graduates. My father, who's here today, I don't point, but I let my gaze drift toward his section for just a fraction of a second, told me I was throwing my life away, that I'd never be anything without that degree. The stadium has gone very, very quiet. I believed him for a long time. I can feel my family's eyes on me like heat lamps. But then I built a life that proved him wrong. The silence holds for one more beat. And then I begin to speak. I've given a lot of speeches. Conference keynotes, investor pitches, panel discussions, that TED Talk that somehow became a thing people share on LinkedIn. I know how to work a room, how to modulate my voice, how to find the through line in a story and pull an audience along with me. But I have never given a speech that mattered like this one. I can feel the weight of it in my chest as I stand at this podium, looking out at 3,000 strangers and the handful of people who have spent my entire adult life misunderstanding me on purpose. "I want to talk to you today about paths," I begin. about the ones we're told to take and the ones we choose instead. My voice is steady, amplified across the stadium. In the graduate section, I can see students settling in, some interested, some still riding the adrenaline of processional and probably not fully listening yet. That's fine. They'll catch up. When I left this university 13 years ago, I didn't have a plan, not a real one. I had an idea, a contract, a possibility, and a belief that I could build something meaningful if I just had the space to try. But I also had a father who told me, in no uncertain terms, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I let that land. I don't look at my father directly, but I know he can feel it. He told me I'd never be successful without a degree, that I'd struggle, that I'd fail, that I'd spend the rest of my life regretting my choice. And for a while, for years actually, I halfway believed him. Even as I was building my first company, even as I was landing clients and hearing a team and creating something real, there was this voice in the back of my head that said, but it doesn't count. Not really. Not without the credential. Some of the graduates are nodding now. I can see it in their faces. They know this feeling, the imposter syndrome, the waiting for someone to tell you you're legitimate. I tried to share my successes with my family. When I signed my first major client, I drove home and told everyone at dinner. My father said, "That's nice, honey," and then changed the subject to my brother's Dean's List achievement. I see Dylan shift in his seat. Even from here, I can see his face has gone red. When I got my first press feature in a major tech publication, I sent my mother the link. She congratulated me and then immediately told me about my brother's internship. My mother's hand is over her mouth now. She's crying openly. When I sold my first company, when I exited with enough money to pay off every debt I had and buy a house and fund my next venture, I mentioned it at Thanksgiving dinner. My father said, "Let me know when you have a real job." The stadium is so quiet, I can hear the breeze moving through the stadium flags. I stopped trying to prove myself to them after that. I stopped sending updates. I stopped expecting them to see me. And I built a life anyway. I take a breath, soften my tone. I built a second company. I wrote a book. I gave talks. I advised founders and invested in people who reminded me of myself, people who'd been told they were doing it wrong but did it anyway. I made mistakes. I failed at things. I also succeeded at things, and slowly I learned that the only approval I actually needed was my own. The graduates are with me now. I can feel the shift, the way a crowd leans in when a story starts to matter to them personally. Here's what I want you to know as you sit here on the edge of your next chapter. The world is going to give you a script. Your parents, your professors, your friends, society at large, they're all going to have opinions about what success should look like for you. And some of that advice will be good. Some of it will come from people who love you and want the best for you. I pause. And some of it will come from people who are so trapped in their own narrow definition of success that they can't see any other way forward. People who measure worth by credentials and titles and the things they can brag about at cocktail parties. People who will love you, maybe, but will never actually see *you. My father's face is stone. You're going to have to decide which voices to listen to. You're going to have to figure out the difference between wisdom and fear, between guidance and control. And at some point, you're probably going to have to choose between the path someone else wants for you and the path that actually fits the shape of your life. I look directly at the graduate section now, at all those young faces. When you make that choice, and you will, in 1,000 small ways and maybe a few really big ones, some people aren't going to understand. Some people are going to think you're making a mistake. Some people are going to tell you you're throwing your life away. My voice gets quieter, more intimate, even as it's being amplified across the stadium. And you're going to have to do it anyway. Someone in the graduate section starts clapping, just a few scattered beats, and then it spreads. Not a standing ovation yet, but genuine applause, the kind that comes from recognition. I wait for it to fade. I don't stand here today to tell you that my path is the right path, or that leaving school is what you should do, or that credentials don't matter. For many of you, this degree you're about to receive represents exactly the right choice. You chose it, You earned it, and it's going to open doors for you. I glanced toward Dylan, let my voice warm. My brother is graduating today, magna cum laude, in fact, and I'm incredibly proud of him. He chose a path that worked for him, and he crushed it. That degree means something, and it should. Dylan's face is doing something complicated, gratitude and embarrassment, and something that might be the beginning of understanding. But what I want you to remember, on the days when nothing is going according to plan, is that there's more than one way to build a meaningful life. That the people who love you might not always understand your choices, but that doesn't make your choices wrong. That you are allowed to define success for yourself, even if that definition doesn't fit on someone else's bumper sticker. I can feel the conclusion coming, the place where I need to tie this together and let them go. This morning, before this ceremony started, I sat with my family in the stadium seating. A family friend asked me what I've been up to. Before I could answer, my father called me the dropout and said I was still figuring things out. I hear a few sharp intakes of breath from the audience. This is the moment where it could tip into cruelty, into public humiliation, and I can feel everyone waiting to see which way I'll go. He didn't know I was your speaker today. I didn't tell him. And honestly, part of me wishes I had. Wishes we lived in a world where I could share these moments with my family and trust that they'd celebrate with me instead of diminishing me. My voice doesn't waver. But we don't always get the family we need. We don't always get the support we deserve. And sometimes the most radical thing we can do is succeed anyway, build anyway, become who we're meant to be anyway, not because someone believed in us, but because we believed in ourselves. I look out at all of them. The graduates, the families, the faculty, the strangers who will never know my whole story. So, class of 2024, here's my charge to you. Go build lives you're proud of. Not lives that look good on paper, not lives that make other people comfortable, but lives that feel true. Surround yourselves with people who see you, really see you, and let go of the ones who can't or won't. Trust your own judgment. Document your wins even if no one's cheering. Set boundaries even with people you love. And when someone tells you you're not enough, or you're doing it wrong, or you'll never make it, prove them wrong by living well. My throat is tight now, but my voice stays clear. You don't need anyone's permission to become who you are. Not your parents, not your professors, not mine. You just need the courage to start and the resilience to keep going when it gets hard. And it will get hard, but you'll be okay, better than okay. I grip the edges of the podium. Thank you for letting me come back here today. Thank you for listening. And congratulations, all of you. You've earned this moment. Now go earn the next one. I step back from the microphone. For a heartbeat, there's silence. And then the stadium erupts. The graduates are on their feet first, a wave of black gowns rising, and then the families follow. The applause is thunderous, layered with whoops and cheers and the particular roar that comes when people feel like they've witnessed something real. I stand there, a little stunned despite myself, and let it wash over me. Dean Morrison is clapping too, beaming at me from her seat on the stage. Faculty members are standing. I can see phones held high, recording, people nudging each other and pointing. And in section 114, row 6, my family is standing too. My mother is sobbing, hands pressed to her face. Aunt Carol looks shell-shocked, clapping mechanically. Uncle Dennis is nodding like something finally makes sense. Dylan is standing in the graduate section, clapping hard, and even from here I can see his face is wet. My father is on his feet. His hands are moving in the motion of applause, but his face is absolutely shattered. He looks 10 years older than he did an hour ago. He looks like a man who just watched his entire understanding of the world collapse in real time. I don't feel triumphant looking at him. I feel sad and free. I step away from the podium. Dean Morrison hugs me quick and tight. "That was perfect," she whispers. "Thank you." I make my way back to my seat as the applause finally fades. The ceremony continues. Dean Morrison returns to the podium to begin conferring degrees by department, but I barely hear it. My heart is pounding. My hands are shaking now that the adrenaline is catching up to me, and I cannot stop thinking about what comes next. I I sit through the degree conferrals in a daze. When Dylan's cohort is called, Arts and Sciences Honors graduates, I stand with everyone else and watch him cross the stage, shake the dean's hand, receive his diploma. He looks out into the crowd as he walks back to his seat, and for just a second his eyes find mine. He nods, just once. I nod back. When the ceremony finally ends, after the final graduate has walked, after the closing remarks, after the benediction and the recessional, the stadium dissolves into chaos. Families pour onto the field to find their graduates. People are hugging and crying and taking approximately 9 million photos. I stay in my seat for a moment, gathering my things, trying to prepare for whatever's about to happen. And then I see Dylan pushing through the crowd toward me. He reaches me before anyone else. He's still in his cap and gown, his diploma clutched in one hand, and his face is doing about 6 things at once. "Holy shit," he says. I stand up. "Hey, congrats on." "Why didn't you tell me?" He's not angry exactly, but his voice is raw. "Any of it. The companies, the book, the TED Talk, this asterisk. Why didn't you tell me you were speaking?" I meet his eyes. "Would you have believed me?" He opens his mouth, closes it, looks down. "Yeah," he says finally, quietly. "That's fair." We stand there for a second, the noise of the crowd swirling around us. "I'm sorry," he says. I've always just let him." He shakes his head, frustrated with himself. "I knew it wasn't fair what he said about you. I just didn't know how bad it was, how much you were actually doing that we never." He stops, swallows. "I'm really sorry." Something in my chest loosens. "Thank you," I say, and then, because he's my little brother and I mean it, "I really am proud of you, Dill. You did great." He hugs me, awkward and tight, his diploma crinkling between us. When he pulls back, our mother is there. She looks wrecked. Her makeup is ruined, her eyes are swollen, and she's clutching her program like it's the only thing holding her together. "Alina," my name comes out broken. "Sweetheart, she dissolves into tears. I don't move to comfort her, not yet. "Why didn't you tell us?" she manages. "All those things you've done, all those accomplishments, why didn't we know?" I take a slow breath. "I tried, Mom. For years I tried. But every time I shared something, Dad turned it into a competition with Dylan, or dismissed it as internet stuff, or just changed the subject. After a while, I stopped trying. But I didn't know. You were there, Mom. At every dinner, every holiday, every conversation where he called me a disappointment. You were there, and you never said anything." She flinches like I've slapped her. "I know," she whispers. "I know, I thought I told myself he didn't mean it the way it sounded, that it was just his way. But you're right, I should have said something, I should have stood up for you." Her honesty cracks something open in me. "Yeah," I say softly, "you should have." She nods, crying harder. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." I let her hug me. She smells like the same perfume she's worn my whole life, and despite everything, I hug her back. When she finally lets go, Aunt Carol is hovering nearby, looking like she wants to spontaneously combust. "We had no idea," she says too loud, "that you'd done so much." I just look at her. I know. She has the grace to look embarrassed. And then my father pushes through the small crowd that's formed around me. He's still in his blazer, but it looks rumpled now. His face is red. He looks like a man who's been backed into a corner and is trying to bluster his way out. "Well," he says, voice too hearty, "that was quite a speech. I always knew you'd figure it out eventually. Just took you a little longer than." "No," my voice is calm, but it cuts through his like a blade. "You don't get to do that." He stops, stares at me. "You called me a dropout an hour ago. You've called me a disappointment for 12 years. You don't get to rewrite that now just because a dean introduced me with credentials you actually respect." People around us have gone quiet. Margaret, the family friend, is pretending very hard not to listen, while obviously listening to every word. He tries to regroup. "It was a joke, Alina. You've always been so sensitive." "It wasn't a joke, Dad. It was cruelty. and you've done it so many times you don't even notice anymore. His face flushes darker. I'm your father. I've always wanted what's best for. You wanted what looked best to your colleagues. There's a difference. He has no answer for that. I soften my voice, just slightly, because despite everything, he's still my father, and this is still hard. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be built on reality. The reality of who I actually am, not the story you've been telling yourself about the daughter who failed you. I've built a good life. I'm proud of what I've done. And I'm not going to keep shrinking myself to make you more comfortable. He looks like he wants to argue. I can see it in his face, the lawyer's instinct to rebut, to cross-examine, to win. But for once in his life, my father has nothing to say. I pick up my bag. I have a flight to catch. Dylan, we should get lunch sometime. For real, just us. Dylan nods quickly. Yeah, I'd like that. I kiss my mother's cheek. Call me when you're ready to have an actual conversation. And then I walk away. Behind me, I hear my father try to say something. My name, maybe, or the beginning of a justification. But I don't turn around. I walk across the stadium field, through the crush of celebrating families, past the volunteers and the photo stations and the balloon bouquets, and out into the parking lot where my rental car is waiting. My hands are shaking as I unlock the door. I sit in the driver's seat for a long moment, just breathing. And then I start laughing. It's not funny exactly, but it's over. It's finally over. I drove straight to the airport after that. I didn't stay for the family dinner. I didn't pose for photos or pretend everything was fine now that the truth was out in the open. I just left. On the plane home, I turned off airplane mode and watched my phone light up with notifications. Texts from Dylan, 3 missed calls from my mother, a long email from Aunt Carol that I deleted without reading, nothing from my father. But also, messages from former classmates who'd been in the audience. LinkedIn requests from parents of graduates who'd looked me up during the ceremony. An email from Dean Morrison with a photo of me at the podium and a note that said you changed lives today. Thank you. A text from my best friend. Please tell me someone recorded that. Someone had. By the time I landed, there were 4 different videos of my speech circulating on Twitter and TikTok, captioned things like, "Woman gives commencement speech at her brother's graduation after family spent years calling her a dropout. And this is what success looks like when you stop asking for permission." One of them had 500,000 views. I didn't plan for it to go viral. Honestly, I still don't know how I feel about it. But I do know this. I'm done performing failure to make other people comfortable. It's been 3 months now. My relationship with my family is still being renegotiated. My mother calls every week. We talk, really talk, in a way we haven't in years. She's asked me questions about my work, my life, the things she missed. She's apologized more than once. I'm not sure we'll ever get back the years we lost to her silence, but we're trying. That counts for something. Dylan and I had lunch, then dinner. Then he came to visit me for a weekend and I showed him around my city, introduced him to my friends, let him see my life the way it actually is. He's asked thoughtful questions. He's learning. We're building something real. My father sent me an email 6 weeks after the graduation. It was stiff and formal and didn't actually contain an apology, but it did contain an acknowledgement that he may have underestimated my accomplishments and would like to discuss moving forward. I wrote back and told him I was open to that conversation, but only if he was willing to actually listen instead of rewriting history. I'm still waiting for his response. Aunt Carol sent a Facebook friend request. I declined it. My life, meanwhile, has continued exactly as it was before, which is to say, busy and full and mine. I'm working on a new venture, advising 3 startups, writing articles, giving talks. I adopted a second dog. I'm dating someone who thinks the graduation story is both hilarious and a little heartbreaking, which feels about right. I don't regret how it happened. Not the secrecy, not the public nature of the reveal, not the speech itself. I spent 12 years trying to earn my father's respect by achieving things. It never worked. The only thing that ever worked was standing up and saying, out loud in front of witnesses, I see what you've been doing, and it stops now. Some people have asked me if I did it for revenge. I don't think I did. I think I did it for closure. For the 19-year-old who left school terrified that everyone was right and she'd never be anything. For the 25-year-old who kept sending accomplishments into a void. For every version of myself that accepted the dropout as an identity instead of rejecting it as a slur. I did it so I could finally stop carrying their version of my story. Here's what I've learned, and what I wish I could go back and tell that scared 19-year-old. Your family's narrative about you is not the truth. They're telling themselves a story that makes sense to them, that fits their worldview, that protects their ego. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to perform it. You can write a different story with your life, and eventually, reality will speak louder than their denial. Document your wins, even when no one's celebrating them. Keep a file. Screenshot the emails, save the press clips, write down the milestones. Not for anyone else, for you. So that on the hard days, you have evidence that you're not crazy, that you're actually doing the thing, that it matters. You don't owe anyone a performance of failure. If people are more comfortable when you're struggling, when you're small, when you're apologizing for your choices, those aren't your people. You're allowed to succeed. You're allowed to be proud. You're allowed to take up space. Sometimes walking away is the only way to build something real. Whether that's walking away from a school that doesn't fit, a job that's killing you, or a family dynamic that requires you to shrink, walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. And finally, no one is coming to give you permission. Not your parents, not your professors, not your heroes. If you wait for someone to tell you you're ready, you're good enough, you're allowed, you'll wait forever. You have to give yourself permission. You have to decide that your life is yours to build, and then build it, even if your hands are shaking. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not. There are days when I still hear my father's voice in my head, telling me I'm not enough. There are moments when I wish my family had been different, had seen me sooner, had celebrated instead of diminished. But I also know this. I built a life I love with people who see me doing work that matters. And I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. Neither do you. If you've ever been the disappointment in your family, if you've ever been dismissed or underestimated or told you'd never make it, I see you. I know how much it costs to keep going anyway. And I'm telling you, it's worth it. Build the life that's true, not the life that looks good on paper. Surround yourself with people who get it. And when someone tries to shrink you down to a story that makes them comfortable, stand up and tell the truth. You're allowed to succeed. You're allowed to set boundaries, even with people you love. You're allowed to become exactly who you are, whether they understand it or not. So here's my question for you, wherever you are right now. What story have you been letting someone else tell about you? And what would it look like to write a different ending? Drop a comment if this one hit home. Tell me where you're listening from, or what narrative you're rewriting, or just that you made it through. I read them all, and I promise you're not alone in this. And if you want more stories about boundaries, justice, and people who refuse to stay small, hit that subscribe button. There are so many more where this came from. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.